Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Charleston. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The daguerreotype was discovered in 1963, tucked between the pages of a leather-bound ledger in the basement of the Charleston County Historical Society. The image itself appeared unremarkable at first glance, a seemingly ordinary photograph of Tradd Street from 1858, capturing the grand homes of Charleston's elite. The photograph had been commissioned by the city to document its architectural splendor, before what many feared would be the coming conflict between North and South. When Professor Martin Wheeler examined it that summer afternoon, he initially saw nothing unusual, just another historical artifact to be catalogued. It wasn't until Wheeler used a magnifying glass on the upper right corner of the image that he noticed a peculiar aberration in one of the second-floor windows of the Mayfield mansion. What appeared to be a shadow or smudge on the glass revealed itself to be something far more disturbing. The professor's report, filed later that month and subsequently buried in the archives, described what he saw as a face pressed against the glass, with features suggesting extreme distress. The discovery prompted a deeper investigation into the history of the Mayfield household and the events of 1858. According to county records, the Mayfield plantation was among the largest in South Carolina, with Harold Mayfield listed as the owner of 73 enslaved persons. His reputation in Charleston society was impeccable. A founding member of the South Carolina Agricultural Society, a deacon at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, and a close confidant to several state senators. His wife Elizabeth was known for her charitable work and sophisticated soirees that drew the cream of Charleston society. Their only daughter, Clara, had just turned 22 that spring. By all accounts, the Mayfields represented the very ideal of Southern aristocracy, wealthy, respected, and above reproach. But municipal records reveal a curious pattern of complaints filed by neighbors on Tradd Street throughout the spring and summer of 1858. Mrs. Eleanor Pinckney, who lived across from the Mayfields, reported unusual disturbances coming from the mansion during the night, sounds of furniture being moved, and occasionally what could only be described as muffled screams. When questioned by authorities, Harold Mayfield explained that one of their house servants was suffering from night terrors and that he had arranged for her to be sent to their country estate to recover. The explanation was accepted without further inquiry. The Mayfield household employed 9 domestic servants, all enslaved. According to the property ledgers discovered in 1965, they were listed as Sarah, age 43, Thomas, age 51, Mary, age 37, William, age 28, Esther, age 19, Joseph, age 34, Rebecca, age 22, Daniel, age 47, and a woman known only as L, age unknown. It was this last entry that would become central to the mystery. There are no further records of L after April of 1858, despite regular updates to the household inventories. Church records from St. Michael's show that Clara Mayfield missed Sunday services for 6 consecutive weeks that spring, an unusual absence for a young woman of her standing. When she reappeared in early June, several parishioners noted a marked change in her demeanor. Mrs. Caroline Huger wrote in her personal diary, found decades later, young Miss Mayfield seems utterly transformed. Where once she was vivacious and quick to engage in conversation, she now sits in perfect silence, her eyes fixed on some distant point. When addressed directly, she responds with only the briefest of remarks. One cannot help but wonder what affliction has befallen the girl. The Mayfield household staff experienced unusual turnover during this period as well. 3 of the Mayfield's house servants were sold or transferred to other properties between May and August of 1858. The official reason given was insubordination, though no specific incidents were recorded. What is known is that all 3, Esther, William and Joseph, had worked primarily on the 2nd floor of the mansion, where the family bedrooms were located, the same floor where the face in the window was later discovered in the photograph. A letter found in 1967, written by Elizabeth Mayfield to her sister in Virginia, hints at deeper troubles within the household. Clara continues in her strange state. The doctor has prescribed laudanum, which provides some relief from her night terrors, but does little to restore her former cheerful disposition. Harold insists we maintain appearances, though I confess I find it increasingly difficult to entertain when my heart is so heavy with concern. The incident has affected us all deeply, though we dare not speak of it openly. The incident, referenced in Elizabeth's letter, remains unspecified. No official record exists of any traumatic event in the Mayfield household during this period. Yet something clearly occurred, something significant enough to transform Clara from a socially engaged young woman to a near recluse, and to prompt the removal of 3 household servants who might have witnessed it. In July of 1858, Harold Mayfield commissioned a series of renovations to the 2nd floor of the mansion. According to the contractor's records preserved in the Charleston archives, these included the complete reconstruction of one bedroom, officially designated as the guest chamber, though household accounts suggest it had been Clara's room. The renovations took nearly 6 weeks to complete and cost a considerable sum. When questioned by acquaintances, Mayfield explained that water damage had necessitated the repairs. A curious entry appears in the ledger of Dr. James Thornwell, the Mayfield family physician, dated June 3, 1858. It reads simply, "Called to Mayfield residence 2 a.m. Patient with severe lacerations to throat and wrists. Blood loss significant. Prognosis uncertain. No name is given for the patient, and no further visits to the Mayfield home are recorded in Thornwell's ledger for several weeks. However, a separate entry in the doctor's personal journal, discovered during a 1969 research project on antebellum medical practices, offers a disturbing addendum. The situation at M continues to trouble my conscience. While I am bound by professional confidentiality, I cannot help but question whether my silence makes me complicit. The explanation offered for the injuries stretches credulity, yet I have no proof to contradict it. God help me if I am protecting something sinister. A receipt from Carrigan's Pharmacy on King Street, dated June 4th, shows a substantial purchase of bandages, laudanum, and chloroform delivered to the Mayfield residence. The order was placed by Harold Mayfield himself, rather than by a servant, as was customary. Throughout this period, the Charleston Mercury continued to publish accounts of the Mayfield's social engagements, though Clara was increasingly noted as absent due to a slight indisposition. By August, she had vanished entirely from the social pages. When questioned by friends, Elizabeth Mayfield explained that Clara was visiting relatives in Savannah for her health. Correspondence preserved in the Georgia Historical Society archives, however, reveals that no such visit took place. Clara's cousins in Savannah wrote repeatedly to inquire after her, receiving only vague reassurances from Elizabeth that Clara was recovering slowly from her nervous complaint. On the morning of August 17, 1858, the city photographer arrived on Tradd Street to document the historic homes for the municipal archives. The Mayfield mansion featured prominently in several shots, including the one that would later reveal the face in the window. According to the photographer's notes, preserved alongside the daguerreotypes, all appeared in good order at the Mayfield residence, though the curtains remained drawn despite the early hour. Mr. Mayfield himself came out to greet me briefly, expressing interest in obtaining copies of the photographs for his personal collection. What the photographer could not have known was that inside the mansion, a drama was unfolding that would remain hidden for more than a century. The face captured in that second-floor window, believed by Professor Wheeler to be female, with features suggesting extreme distress, provides the only visual evidence of what may have transpired. 3 days after the photograph was taken, Harold Mayfield announced that the family would be departing for an extended stay at their plantation in the country. According to their neighbors, the Mayfields left before dawn, taking minimal luggage and only 2 servants, Thomas and Sarah, the eldest and presumably most trusted of their household staff. The remaining servants were either sold or sent to work at the plantation. They did not return to Charleston until November. When they did, Clara was not with them. Harold explained to inquiring friends that his daughter had chosen to remain at the country estate, where the air was more conducive to her fragile health. By the following spring, he began informing associates that Clara had decided to enter a convent, seeking a life of religious contemplation away from the distractions of society. No records exist of her entering any convent in South Carolina or the surrounding states. In 1859, Harold Mayfield commissioned a memorial plaque in St. Michael's Church, dedicated to "Our beloved daughter Clara, whose pure soul has found peace in the Lord's embrace." The plaque made no mention of when or how Clara had died, and no funeral service was ever held. When the church sexton inquired about this unusual arrangement, Mayfield reportedly replied that some grief is too private to be shared, even in the house of God. The last known reference to Clara Mayfield appears in a letter written by a former classmate, Catherine Rhett, who claimed to have glimpsed Clara being escorted into the Mayfield carriage late one night in December of 1858. In her letter to another friend, Rhett wrote, "I am certain it was Clara, though she was heavily veiled and supported between her father and another man I did not recognize. They moved with great haste, and when I called out her name, Mr. Mayfield looked up with such alarm that I feared I had committed some grave impropriety. Clara made no response at all, moving as one sleepwalking. I have inquired after her health repeatedly since then, but the family offers only the vaguest reassurances." The mystery of what happened to Clara Mayfield might have remained buried forever if not for the discovery of another document in 1968, a confession written by Thomas, the Mayfield's longtime butler, shortly before his death in 1872. The confession, written in a shaky hand on the back of a church pamphlet, was found tucked inside a family Bible donated to the American Antiquarian Society. Thomas wrote, "I go to meet my Maker with this burden upon my soul. What happened in that house was an abomination in the eyes of God. The young mistress and Elle were discovered together. What followed was not justice, but madness. Elle died that night, though they claimed she had been sold away. The young mistress tried to follow her 3 nights later, cutting herself with her mother's sewing scissors. They saved her body, but not her mind. When the doctor could do no more, they took her to that place in the country where such unfortunates are kept away from decent society. I helped carry her to the carriage, wrapped in sheets still stained with her blood. May God forgive me for my silence, for I have no hope of forgiveness from those who suffered. The place in the country referenced by Thomas is believed to be Shady Grove Asylum, a private institution established in 1845 for the treatment of nervous disorders among the Southern elite. Records from Shady Grove, preserved in the South Carolina Medical University archives, list a Miss M, admitted in August of 1858, suffering from acute melancholia with suicidal tendencies. The patient remained under care until her death in 1863, reportedly from wasting disease. No further details are provided. As for the mysterious E.L., mentioned both in the Mayfield household inventory and in Thomas's confession, her identity might have remained completely obscured if not for a chance discovery in 1969. During renovations to the former Mayfield plantation house, workers uncovered a small tin box buried beneath the floorboards of the overseer's cabin. Inside was a folded piece of linen embroidered with the letter L, alongside a crudely fashioned doll made from corn husks and scraps of fabric. Also in the box was a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be human hair, and a scrap of paper bearing the words, "My heart is with you always, your Clara." The implications of Thomas's confession and these artifacts are disturbing. They suggest that Clara Mayfield and the enslaved woman known as L shared a relationship intimate enough to provoke a violent response from Harold Mayfield, one that resulted in L's death and Clara's attempted suicide. The exact nature of their relationship remains speculative, but in the context of 1858 Charleston, any close attachment between a plantation owner's daughter and an enslaved person would have been scandalous. If that relationship crossed the boundaries of accepted female companionship into something more profound, the consequences would have been severe. Historian Margaret Thornton, who studied the case extensively in the 1970s, concluded, "The fate of L. and Clara Mayfield represents one of the many hidden tragedies of the antebellum South. A system that not only enslaved human beings, but also ruthlessly suppressed any connection that threatened to recognize their full humanity. What these women meant to each other, we may never know with certainty, but the lengths to which the Mayfield family went to erase both L's existence and Clara's subsequent breakdown suggests a bond powerful enough to shatter the careful illusions of their world. The photograph that sparked this investigation, with its ghostly face at the window, now hangs in the Charleston Museum's permanent collection. Experts continue to debate whether the image shows Clara Mayfield, the mysterious L, or simply a trick of light on the glass. What cannot be disputed is that behind the elegant facade of the Mayfield mansion, a human tragedy unfolded. One of countless such stories lost to history, preserved only by chance and the unblinking eye of a camera that captured what no one was meant to see. In 1969, the last remaining section of Thomas's confession was discovered, having been separated from the main document. These final lines read, "They say her ghost still walks the upper floor of that house, searching for what was taken from her. I do not believe in such tales. The true horror is not what walks after death, but what we do to each other in life, with our eyes open and our consciences closed. That is the legacy of this house and all who served in it. May God have mercy on us all." The Mayfield mansion still stands on Tradd Street, though it has passed through many hands since 1858. Current residents report no unusual disturbances, and the second-floor window where the face appeared has long since been replaced. But the questions raised by that single photograph remain. Who was looking out from that window? What were they trying to tell us? And how many other stories like Clara and L's remain hidden behind the elegant facades of history, waiting for someone to look more closely, to see what was never meant to be seen? Some secrets, it seems, refuse to stay buried. They find their way to the surface, like the face in that window, pressed against the glass, looking out at a world that had already decided to look away. In 1965, a graduate student named Caroline Bishop discovered an unusual entry in the records of Dr. Samuel Cooper, a physician who had occasionally attended the Mayfield family. The entry, dated May 28, 1858, noted, "Called to examine female servant at Mayfield residence. Patient presence with contusions to face and torso. Master insists injuries resulted from fall downstairs. Physical evidence suggests otherwise. No treatment permitted beyond basic dressing of wounds. This clinical observation, buried among hundreds of routine medical notes, provides a grim timeline. Elle was still alive in late May, but by early June she had disappeared from all records. A letter discovered in the personal papers of Judge William Harper, a close associate of Harold Mayfield, adds another disturbing layer to the story. Written in July 1858, Mayfield sought legal advice regarding a delicate situation involving certain property rights. He explained that he had disposed of problematic property following an incident of grave misconduct and wished to ensure that his actions were beyond legal scrutiny. Judge Harper's response reassured Mayfield that, in matters concerning one's own property, particularly in cases involving moral corruption, the law grants considerable latitude to the property holder. The euphemistic language barely disguises the brutal reality. Harold Mayfield had killed Elle and wanted assurance he would face no consequences. The Mayfield case might have remained just another buried tragedy of the antebellum South, if not for the persistence of Professor Wheeler. Following his discovery of the face in the photograph, Wheeler spent nearly a decade piecing together fragmentary evidence. His work was not always welcomed. Several prominent Charleston families, including descendants of the Mayfield's associates, attempted to block his research. Wheeler reported receiving anonymous threats and once returned to his office to find his files ransacked. "Some people," he wrote in his journal in 1967, "would prefer that certain aspects of history remain unseen, particularly when they implicate their ancestors in acts of unspeakable cruelty." Wheeler's breakthrough came when he located Sarah, the oldest of the Mayfield house servants. Though she had died in 1902, her granddaughter preserved a recorded interview conducted by the Federal Writers Project in 1937. In this recording, the elderly Sarah never mentioned the Mayfields by name, referring only to a certain house on Tradd Street where she had served before the war. She spoke of two young women who found comfort in each other's company, and how the master discovered them one evening in an embrace that left no doubt as to the nature of their attachment. What followed, according to Sarah, was a night of such horror that even now my hand trembles to recall it. Sarah's account confirms what Thomas's confession had implied, that Clara Mayfield and Elle had formed a romantic attachment, one that crossed the boundaries of race, class, and the institution of slavery itself. Such a relationship would have been viewed not merely as scandalous, but as a fundamental threat to the social order. Harold Mayfield's violent response, while extreme, reflected the desperate determination of the slave-owning class to maintain absolute control over the people they enslaved, particularly when it came to intimate relations. The Charleston County Coroner's records for 1858, examined by Wheeler in 1968, contain a curious entry dated June 1st. It notes simply, "Female body, apparently Negro, discovered in Cooper River near Drum Island. Severe trauma to skull and throat, identity unknown, no investigation pursued." The body was buried in an unmarked grave in the colored section of the municipal cemetery. While it cannot be proven conclusively that this was Elle, the timing aligns perfectly with her disappearance from the Mayfield household. Clara's fate, following her removal to Shady Grove Asylum, is equally tragic. Patient records, partially preserved despite a fire that destroyed much of the institution's archives during the Civil War, describe a young woman who refuses to speak or acknowledge her surroundings and must be restrained during periodic episodes of violent distress. Treatment consisted primarily of cold water baths, forced feeding when she refused to eat, and increasing doses of laudanum and other sedatives. By 1860, the attending physician noted that patient M shows little prospect of recovery, having retreated completely into herself. Her death in 1863, officially attributed to wasting disease, may well have been the result of self-starvation. her final act of resistance in a life over which she had lost all control. The story of Clara and Elle resonates beyond its immediate historical context. It provides a rare glimpse into the hidden relationships that sometimes formed across the brutal divides of slavery, relationships that challenged the very foundations of the system and were therefore suppressed with extraordinary violence. It also highlights the particular vulnerability of women, both enslaved and free, in a society that denied their autonomy and punished severely any deviation from prescribed behavior. In 1968, during the renovation of a former slave cabin on what had once been Mayfield plantation land, workers discovered a small hiding place beneath the hearth. Inside was a hand-sewn cloth pouch containing a lock of dark hair tied with blue thread, a smooth river stone with the initial C crudely etched into its surface, and a scrap of paper bearing a partial quote from the Song of Solomon. "Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it." While it cannot be proven that these items belong to Elle, their deliberate concealment suggests they were precious to someone who needed to keep their attachment secret. What makes the Mayfield case particularly notable is not just the tragedy itself, but the extraordinary efforts made to erase it from history. Harold and Elizabeth Mayfield constructed an elaborate fiction, Clara entering a convent, then dying peacefully, that was accepted without question by Charleston society. The enslaved woman Elle was simply eliminated from the record, as though she had never existed. Even Thomas and Sarah, who knew at least parts of the truth, maintained their silence for decades. It was only the chance preservation of a photograph and the face captured in that second-story window that eventually brought the buried story to light. In 1969, Professor Wheeler published his findings in the Journal of Southern History. The article, titled "The Face at the Window: Recovering a Silenced History," drew sharp criticism from several prominent historians who questioned his methodology and conclusions. Wheeler was accused of sensationalizing the past and projecting contemporary concerns onto historical evidence. These critiques, however, often came from scholars with direct family connections to the Charleston elite. Other historians, particularly those from the emerging field of African American studies, recognized the significance of Wheeler's work in recovering histories deliberately suppressed by those in power. The controversy surrounding Wheeler's article ultimately cost him his position at the University of South Carolina. He spent his remaining years compiling additional evidence about the Mayfield case, though much of this research remained unpublished at the time of his death in 1972. His papers, donated to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, continue to provide valuable insights into the hidden histories of the antebellum South. In 1967, a former slave cabin on what had once been Mayfield plantation land was scheduled for demolition. Before the structure was razed, a team from the Historic American Building Survey documented the site. During this process, they discovered something unusual carved into one of the support beams: the letters L+C inside a crude heart. Below this was etched 1857. The carving was located in a spot that would have been concealed by a bed or chest, visible only to someone who knew exactly where to look. This simple graffiti, preserved for over a century, provides perhaps the most poignant evidence of the relationship between Clara and Elle. A relationship deemed so dangerous, it had to be literally erased from history. The Mayfield mansion changed hands several times following the Civil War. By the early 20th century, it had been divided into apartments, its grand rooms partitioned, and its history largely forgotten. In 1951, it was purchased by the Charleston Historical Preservation Society and restored to its antebellum appearance. Tours of the house highlighted its architectural features and the refined lifestyle of its former owners, with no mention of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. It was only after Wheeler's discoveries that the tour script was reluctantly modified to acknowledge that not all aspects of life in this house reflected the ideal of Southern gentility. In 1968, a previously unknown diary was discovered in the attic of a house in Savannah, Georgia. The diary belonged to Catherine Huger, a cousin of Elizabeth Mayfield, who had visited the family in Charleston during the spring of 1858. Her entries provide a rare outsider's perspective on the household during the critical period. On May 15th, she wrote, "Clara seems much changed from when I last saw her. There is a brightness to her eyes, a secret joy she cannot quite conceal. When I inquired as to its cause, she merely smiled and said she had discovered something wonderful that she was not yet at liberty to share. I suspect a gentleman caller, though Elizabeth has mentioned none." 2 weeks later, on May 29th, Huger's tone had dramatically shifted. "The household is in turmoil. Uncle Harold paces like a man possessed, while Aunt Elizabeth keeps to her room, emerging only for meals, which she barely touches. Clara, I have not seen at all. They say she is unwell and cannot receive visitors. The servants move through the house like ghosts, speaking only when spoken to, their eyes downcast. Something terrible has occurred, though none will speak of it. I feel I have overstayed my welcome and shall return to Savannah tomorrow." Catherine Huger never mentioned the Mayfields in her diary again, suggesting that whatever knowledge she gained of the events in their household was too disturbing to commit to paper, even in a private journal. Her silence is typical of the way Southern elite society closed ranks around its members, preserving reputations at the expense of truth. The final piece of the Mayfield puzzle emerged in 1969 when construction workers renovating the basement of St. Michael's Church discovered a small leather-bound book wedged behind a loose stone in the foundation wall. The book proved to be Elizabeth Mayfield's private devotional journal, containing prayers and religious reflections spanning the years 1855 to 1860. The entries for May and June of 1858 are particularly revealing. On May 30th, Elizabeth wrote, "Lord in heaven, what sin have I committed that such abomination should enter my house? The girl I raised with such care, the daughter of my heart, engaged in unnatural acts with a slave. Harold's rage I understand, but fear it has carried him too far. There is blood on the stairs that will not wash away. Clara screams through the night, calling a name I cannot bear to write. I pray for the strength to endure this trial and for God's mercy on us all." By June 7th, her tone had shifted to resignation. "The doctor says Clara's mind has broken. She recognizes neither her father nor myself and speaks only to ask for the one who is gone. We have told her that Elle has been sold away, but she does not believe us. Harold says we must send her to Shady Grove, where they know how to manage such cases. I cannot bear the thought, yet see no alternative. May God forgive us for what we have done and what we must yet do." The final entry regarding Clara, dated August 18th, reads simply, "It is finished. Clara has been taken to Shady Grove. The room has been emptied and will be rebuilt. We will tell everyone she has entered a convent, seeking peace in religious contemplation. In time, perhaps, we will believe it ourselves." Elizabeth Mayfield's journal provides the most direct confirmation of what happened in that house in the summer of 1858. It reveals not just the tragic fate of Clara and Elle, but also the elaborate web of deception constructed to conceal it, a deception maintained for over a century until a face in a photograph began to unravel it. The story of Clara Mayfield and the woman known only as Elle is more than just a historical footnote or a sensational tale. It illuminates the brutal mechanisms through which slavery maintained itself, not just through physical force, but through the systematic suppression of human connection across the boundaries of race and status. It reveals how thoroughly the dominant narrative of history can erase those who challenge its foundations. And it reminds us that behind the elegant facades of the antebellum South lay countless untold stories of resistance, attachment, and terrible retribution. In 1969, a small memorial plaque was installed in the Charleston African American Museum, dedicated to Elle, and all those whose names, lives, and loves were erased from history. Each year on the anniversary of Wheeler's discovery of the photograph, fresh flowers appear beneath it, left by visitors moved by this recovered story of love and tragedy. The face in the window continues to gaze out at us across more than a century and a half, challenging us to look more closely at the histories we think we know, to search for the stories hidden in the margins, and to acknowledge the full humanity of those the powerful sought to render invisible. In that gaze lies both accusation and plea, a demand that we not look away, that we bear witness to the truth, however painful it may be. As for the Mayfield photograph itself, advanced digital analysis conducted in 1968 confirmed what Professor Wheeler had initially suspected. The face in the window belonged to a young woman in extreme distress. Whether it was Clara, Elle, or another woman entirely, we may never know with certainty. But the power of that image lies precisely in its ambiguity, in the way it forces us to confront the possibility that what we see is only a fraction of what was there, that behind every historical facade lie hidden depths we have only begun to explore. The last word on the Mayfield case comes from Thomas's confession. The truth cannot remain buried forever. It rises like a body from the depths, refusing to stay submerged no matter how many stones are tied to its feet. And when it surfaces, God help those who tried to drown it, for its accusation will echo through the generations. His prophecy proved accurate, though it took more than a century for that truth to finally emerge. Today, the Mayfield Mansion stands as a silent witness to the past. Tourists pass by, admiring its classical proportions and elegant ironwork, largely unaware of the tragedy that unfolded behind its walls. But for those who know the story, who have seen the face in that second-story window, the house speaks volumes about the human cost of an inhuman system, and about the extraordinary measures taken to preserve the illusion of its benevolence. Some visitors to the house report an unusual sensation when standing beneath that particular window, a feeling of being watched, of someone trying desperately to communicate across the gulf of time. Whether this is merely the power of suggestion or something more mysterious remains open to interpretation. But perhaps, in the end, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that we now know to look up, to acknowledge the presence that for so long went unrecognized, to bear witness finally to those who were never meant to be seen. In the words of Margaret Thornton, who completed Wheeler's research after his death, the true horror of the Mayfield case lies not in what happened, terrible though it was, but in how completely it was erased, how efficiently society closed ranks to protect its own myths. When we recover such histories, we do more than simply add to our knowledge of the past. We restore humanity to those from whom it was stolen, not once, but twice, first in life and then in memory. The Charleston County Historical Society now includes a permanent exhibit on the Mayfield case, featuring enlarged copies of the photograph with the face in the window circled in red. Next to it hangs a simple statement: history is not just what is preserved in official records, but also what was deliberately omitted from them. Our task is not merely to read the archives, but to recognize their silences, and to listen for the voices that speak through them, despite all efforts to impose quiet. As we bring this documentary to a close, the mystery of Clara Mayfield and Elle remains partially unresolved. We may never know exactly what transpired in that house during those fateful days in May of 1858. We may never know the full extent of their relationship, or precisely how it was discovered. But what we do know with certainty is that two women formed a bond powerful enough to threaten an entire social order. A bond that cost one her life and the other her freedom and eventually her sanity. Their story, rescued from deliberate obscurity by the chance preservation of a photograph and the persistent work of researchers, reminds us that history is not merely what happened, but also what those in power wanted us to believe happened. It challenges us to look more closely at the historical record, to search for the faces at the windows, the stories in the margins, and the truths that were never meant to be told. In that sense, the Mayfield case is not merely a historical curiosity or a tragic footnote. It is a reminder of our responsibility to the past, to recover and acknowledge the full humanity of those who lived it, especially those whose humanity was denied in their own time. For as long as we continue to look, to question, and to listen for the silenced voices, they are not truly gone. They live on in our recognition, in our remembrance, and in our refusal to accept the comfortable lies that power tells about itself. The face in the window continues to watch us. The question is, are we willing to look back?